Okay, so shame is great is the title of the talk. Can you hear me at the back? So it's one of those really annoying, provoking, ambiguous titles with a twist. Shame is great. Of course it's not, but I'm going to show you how it can be in a certain way. So this series isn't really interested in the Dharma. The series isn't really interested in how the Dharma isn't conventional. The Dharma isn't interested in conventional ideas about society. And sometimes the ideas we take as truths can be turned on their head. And we do go to great lengths to avoid shame. But I'm going to hopefully convince you that there is a way that it can be extremely helpful. So I'll leave that twist until later. So how does this hot blush, this visceral emotion show up for us, and why? So you might remember on the intro course that we talked about us having a PR team, a PR agent that works on behalf of us, on behalf of our ego, spinning the facts, building an image of who we want to be and how we want to be presented to the world. And that we learned on the intro course about how that creates a mask. And sometimes the mask slips. And how we want to be seen by the world, and even how we want to be seen by ourselves, is all part of the image that the PR team are very heartily engaged in creating. And that mask that is created sometimes even disguises ourselves to ourselves. And it can create a mask that says, I'm a victim, or I'm cynical, or I'm ethical, or I'm not interested in ethics, I'm good, I'm bad, I'm all of these things. And we can have half a dozen different masks that relate to certain situations that we're in. And so we end up kind of living behind that mask. And our actions and our speech need to be congruent with that image for the mask to stay in place. And so we can have like half a dozen different images for different occasions. I'm like this with my family. I'm like this at work. I'm like this with the Sangha. And when that mask slips, it can be very, very painful. And the stronger that we're attached to the image that we create, the more painful it is. And the American researcher Brené Brown has done a lot of work on shame, a lot of research on shame. Just before we move on to the twist, just want to talk about how it can be helpful to look at, to untangle our views, to get to know what our beliefs are around shame. And the research that she's done kind of comes up with 4 areas. Guilt around something that we've done. So especially if that isn't congruent with the image. So a really careful driver getting a speeding ticket, for example, that would make somebody feel very guilty around this behavior. So they've done something that they're ashamed of. Another aspect is humiliation, getting something really wrong in public. Another aspect is embarrassment, which can be just really fleeting and funny and very human. Like once I walked the whole length of New Brighton Prom with my skirt tucked in my tights. Oh my God, that was so embarrassing. But then there's the 4th kind of aspect of it, the I am bad kind of shame, that I'm wrong, I'm deeply flawed, there's something wrong with me, I'm deeply wrong. And this kind of shame is, it's that kind of doom, dread, visceral, hot shame that is completely out of proportion, debilitating, and we can't be creative when we're in that. The mind just shuts down, and it thrives in secret. So it's very, very personal. It's very personal. Any of those other things that I was talking about, the behavior or the humiliation or the embarrassment, would be very significant to me, but not to you. And if the I am bad shame kind of touches any one of those other ones, then that will affect how quickly we can move through it. So this comes out of our conditioning. And it's what Sangha, this aspect of the I am bad thing that we can get into is what Sangha described as irrational guilt. So I've talked about this I did a talk a while ago on confession, talked about it then. So Sangha talks about this kind of debilitating, where your mind shuts down, kind of shame that we can get into as irrational guilt, and it has 3 aspects to it. So the first aspect that he described is that we've done something that somebody else doesn't want us to do. So that could be a group that we belong to, that we identify with. It could be our family. It could be a religion that we belong to. But we've done something that somebody else doesn't want us to do. The second aspect is that we're dependent on that person or group for approval, for love, actually. And the fear of withdrawal of that love is all part of it. And the third aspect is there's a fear of punishment. So, and being found out. So those 3 aspects make it, we can get locked into this very unhelpful cycle of secrecy and unskillfulness. And we've just really got to be able to name that and be able to understand what's going on. So it can feel like we've done something wrong. It can feel like that, but we haven't even broken a precept. So we've gone against what can be a family norm or a religious expectation or a societal norm. We haven't even broken a precept, but we feel like we've done something terrible. And Sangha called this irrational guilt. And it's a very strong wrong view. So it's the I am bad and I've done something terribly wrong. And we've just got to pull this apart. If we're going to get anywhere, we've got to really own this and understand it and be able to pull it apart and see what's going on. It's very strong about work, around the work ethic, parenting, being a member of the family, being in a religion, around our sexuality. Very strong conditioning that can lead to this. So this kind of shame isn't great. So that's absolutely, I just want to say that really clearly. This is not helpful. It's not in any way going to help us move forward. It's debilitating. It just keeps us stuck. And so I can remember, and I've also talked about this before, but it was so strong that whenever I went on retreat, when my kids were, when my son was in his 20s and the girls were in their late teens, and if I went on retreat, the whole retreat would just be blighted by shame and guilt that I'd left my kids at home and I was on retreat and I was selfish and self-obsessed and I'd shut my eyes and they'd all be there, saying, "Oh, come home, Mom." There's absolutely nothing wrong with them. They were all absolutely fine. But it was an expectation, a kind of, my conditioning was such that that led to that. And I just had to keep coming back to, I haven't broken a precept. I went through the precepts and I hadn't broken a precept. And somebody on that retreat helped me to understand that it can be unpicked, that we can unpick these. They're a tangle, a jungle, a thicket that the Buddha described of views that we have to try and untangle. And if you've ever seen a thicket in India, then the thorns are like this and they're really sharp and scary. But the Dharma says that these views are unhelpful, they're not going to get us anywhere, we need to unpick them. So, why would I think such a thing, that I am bad? Where would that come from? That I'm bad, I'm wrong, that has absolutely no place in our Dharma life, in our practice. In fact, the absolute opposite is true, that we are jewels, that we are incredibly beautiful, sparkly, wonderful jewels that's hidden by those wrong views. And I was listening to, we did a puja here on Sunday for Sangha and Punyamala began the puja by listening to a little snippet from Sangha. And it was so it was so lovely to hear him say, why is a jewel chosen to describe this, this potential for Buddhahood that we have? And he was saying that you can't contaminate a jewel. You can't mark it. It's always going to come out shining. All it needs is a little buff. And the jewel is always going to be there, perfectly, beautifully, sparkly, shining underneath. And that's what we are. It's the absolute opposite of these wrong views that we can have, that there's something wrong with me. So this is the twist is coming. The good news is coming, is that there is a place in the Dharma life for what we call, I'm going to use the Pali terms because we're always better with the Pali terms, always better using Pali to understand these complex terms, I think. So what we have, instead of those horrible, debilitating forms of wrong views, those kinds of shame, is we have two lovely, beautiful terms that I've used before, that lots of you will know, Hri and Apatrapya. And I was convinced by the team to write it up. And I don't know if you can even see it. If you can't see it, then stand up and see. So we've got Hri and Apatrapya. And Subhuti, who wrote this book, and lots of other books as well, very important order member, says that Hri and Apatrapya are the guardians of the world. And partly because they're the guardians of our mind, I think. So Hri is clean. It's the ouch. I think that the word Hri has, I might ask Suvana Garba, you probably know, because you know everything about about things like this, to do with a blush. Yeah. So Hri is associated with a blush. So it's that kind of, ouch, I know I've broken a precept. So it's nothing, it's just like, oh, that's really clean. It's one of the 5 and I've done it and I've broken or one of the 10 if you're an order member, or one of the 10 if you're training for ordination. You might want to be looking at the 10 precepts, which have 3 extra speech precepts in. So anyway, so the Hri and Apatrapya are the guardians of the world. They guard us from confusion and wrong views. So the first one, Hri, is this remorse. It's a sense of remorse, very positive mental state, although it might be painful. And Hri makes us go, ouch, because we know we've broken a precept. We might blush, but it hasn't got that kind of debilitating doom and dread feeling to it. It's just very clean and obvious. Oh yeah, I've broken a precept. Everyone does that from time to time. That's what I've done. And Subhuti talks about it. He says, if we're at all sensitive, we feel disquiet when we've acted unskillfully, harming ourselves or others. Or even when we just feel tempted to do so. This disquiet is triggered by our own immediate sensitivity to life. So it's innate, actually. Hri is innate. It's in us anyway. If we're sensitive, we can feel it. And we saw this on the intro course. Do you remember when we had that night where we made up the precepts? And we all came up with the precepts, a universal set of precepts that we all kind of created between us. So if those universal principles are innate, because it was obvious that it was, we came from the back of the hall, didn't we, with what you'd said and what we created. What you created was the precepts on that intro course. Then breaking that precept is also innate. So it's already in us. It's natural. But Hri can also spring from a deeper understanding of the Dharma, especially karma, where we know that our actions have effects. And so as we practice, we learn to see the beauty of ethics, the beauty of the precepts, and we become more and more sensitive that we don't want to break them. So he says, Hri can be triggered either by your innate moral sense or by your love and devotion to the Dharma. And so faith and connection with the beauty of the Dharma life, naturally spills over into apatrapya, which is the second one there. So these come together. So apatrapya is that feeling that you get when you're in the middle, or just about to, or have just done, if you've broken a precept. And you know you're in that, you're in there, and you think, you bring to mind the people that you know that are wiser and kinder than you are, that you look up to, that seem to embody the ideal that you're striving for. When you think of them, it makes you not do that thing, or at least it slows you down, or at least you bring them in, and the gap is a little bit bigger, and it just gives you a chance to rethink by bringing them in. And it's not like having like a God on your shoulder watching everything you're doing. It comes out of friendship, and it comes out of that. It's hard to it's a feeling that you get, that you feel like you don't want to let that person down in a way. But it's also a natural spilling over of Hri. So Subhuti says again, apatrapya springs from the sense of that ideal triggered into life by our relationship with another person, not people in general, another particular person, but those whom we see as strongly imbued with that ideal. While such people might not necessarily be perfect, they have enough of the spirit of wisdom and kindness to inspire our trust, admiration, and love. So that's apatrapya. So we feel the ouch, and we think, what would they think? What would they do? And that helps us guard ourselves a little bit, helps us to come back from the brink. Or if we have done it, it helps us to think, I'm going to go and talk to them about that thing. So there's nothing of the secrecy, nothing of the shame. It's much more, it's very positive, although it can hurt, it's very, very positive. Everyone is unskillful from time to time. And it's based, the fact that the reason that we can just so straightforwardly say that is because we know, again, from the intro course, that we can change. Everybody can change. We're not locked in to that unskillfulness. We can all change. And we might need to talk to a kinder and wiser friend to help us untangle that pattern of unskillfulness and not give ourselves a hard time for doing it. That just makes everything worse. So you can see that Hri has nothing, Hri and apatrapya has nothing of the shame. So this kind of shame is great. Although we don't use that word, Hri and apatrapya are great. So it's a very beautiful expression of the innate wisdom and connection that we have. So they are our guardians from confusion. And when we feel that coming up, we can think, oh, this is Hri. Although it feels rubbish, actually, I've broken a precept. Brilliant, I've noticed it. That, it's a bit like in meditation when you notice that you're distracted. You notice that you've broken a precept. Yay! And that we're on the right track. So we feel that remorse, which helps us not want to do it again. And if you're interested in thinking more about that, there's another talk on about confession that is on the system somewhere. It might be worth looking at. So as we become more sensitive, we experience Hri, and we can distinguish between that and irrational guilt, and it's incredibly liberating. So eventually I was able to go on retreat and not be completely immersed and flooded with all this shame and guilt. It was much more straightforward. It's much cleaner, more straightforward. Yes, we all do this. It's painful, but it's positive. So we can open up more to our kinder and wiser friends, and we allow ourselves to be more fully seen. And we mind less when the mask slips. So eventually there's no mask at all. There isn't a mask. We don't need it. Talk more about that in a minute. So irrational guilt. is not great. But Hri and Apachapya are. Shame thrives on secrecy. Hri and Apachapya thrive in openness and vulnerability. Shame is debilitating and keeps you locked in on skillfulness. Hri and Apachapya are liberating and motivating. So how do we cultivate them? Well, first of all, we need to be okay with the mask slipping. We've got to know that we've got one, and we've got to be okay. Give our PR team a holiday. And one of the things we can do is take on, for maybe one day a week or something, the truthful speech precept. And I'm just going to read a little bit from, it sort of seems a lot from the intro course. It's such a good course, isn't it? So on the intro course, we have that night, when everyone takes on a precept and argues its case. So this one is about honesty, authenticity, straightforwardness, and not concealment. So the positive aspect, truthful communication. So this precept asks us to be straightforward and transparent and authentic, which creates trust and good relationships, relieves us of a lot of anxiety, and allows us to feel good about ourselves, which we need. And the negative side of it, I undertake the training principle of abstaining from false speech. So a little bit from that. So we know that we're not talking about outright lies. We're talking about a more subtle dimension. So truthfulness allows us to see ourselves for more as who we are behind the mask. Because often we're taken in by the image that we present to the outside as well. And unless we see ourselves as we are, we don't know what we need to work on. So truthfulness sounds really risky, but people do trust and respect people who admit they've got faults, have integrity, and can be trusted. But also, it's not just about that. It's about owning our qualities as well. It's about being okay with being a great person as well. With being a decent human being who's trying. And our own qualities, it's that thing about not batting off a compliment. So it's just as unskillful not to stand in our strengths as it is not to stand in our pitfalls and the things that we do unskillfully. So we can be really quick to spot our faults, but also it's really important to own how much we're growing. So either because we want to present an image that emphasizes how hard things are, that's a bit of a thing. We can get locked into that. When things have been really difficult for ages, and then suddenly things, you kind of feel like, oh yeah, I feel all right, I feel great actually. And you feel great, and a bit of time goes by and you feel great. And somehow it's not quite as easy to say that, and it's easier to talk about how difficult things are. And if you say, yeah, I'm doing great, then we might not get the sympathy or the attention that we would have got. And our conditioning says, on the other way, we shouldn't get too big for our boots or big-headed or show off or be vain. So, Brené Brown says this a really good thing, which I love, which says something like, don't diminish, this might not be this. Don't diminish, don't puff up, just stand your sacred ground. I really love that. So we go all weird, don't we? We don't know what to say when we're rejoicing, sometimes. Much ceremony people are going to have to crack that one. So again, being truthful includes allowing our light to shine, allowing that as well, just as much as allowing our unskillfulness. And it can be very inspiring. So we just have to say thank you. When somebody says something nice, just say thank you. And it's also not just out loud speech. It's that we have to be, there's a whole area of truthfulness that just is about being on our own. And we're moving on to the next bit of the talk. On your thing, you'll have a little piece of paper there. I'm going to sing you a song in a minute. Well, there's a little gang of us going to sing you a song, and that's the chorus, which you can join in with if you want. So, Mraksha, I don't need to write that up because you've got it written in front of you. So we talked about shame thriving in secrecy, and Hri, thriving in openness. And Mraksha means concealment. Mraksha is a state of being where we're hiding something, we're being sly about something. It's unpleasant. Slyness and concealment, and we all do it. We all do it. So it could be because of shame. It could be because of all that other stuff, the unhelpful stuff that we talked about at the beginning. But Subhuti talks about it mostly being driven by craving, that we want something and we want it and we just want it. So we're going to do what we can to get that thing and hope that no one notices. And that's what Mraksha is. It's gratification of that craving. And it's our private, unskillful moments in thought and action and speech, but no one else hears it. So we're all on our own, and it's the unskillfulness that goes on in our mind and in our actions when no one else can witness it. And it's hilarious. It is hilarious what the things we get up to. And Subhuti talks about it as being the morality of the private moment. It's really worth thinking about, though. So, we all do it, and we do it to a greater or lesser extent at different times in our lives. But but it's when we're on our own. It's the things that we do when we're on our own, and that's what the song's about in a minute. So we think we get away with it. And I really seriously thought until quite recently that I didn't consciously thinking, but I definitely believed somewhere along the line that I was getting away with the things that I was doing on my own, the unskillfulness, the little thefts, the little lies, all these little things that I was doing. Because I think it was because I'd stopped believing in God. And when I believed in God, I did it much less. But it was like when I stopped believing in God, it was like free reign. It's like, who's going to stop me? There's no one to stop me. There's no one standing over my shoulder. There's nobody telling me I can't do this stuff. It's just up to me, what I do. And I honestly think for a really, really long time, I thought I was getting away with it. And we think it doesn't matter. As long as nobody knows about it, and as long as nobody finds out about it, then we think it doesn't matter. But I don't think I knew I thought that, but it was a really deeply embedded wrong view. So it was just a habit. It was just the way things were. I thought I was getting away with it. But you know how our mind is full of grooves that we either dig deeper or we let fade away. What's the intro called? It's like a thread. Where we put our energy gets stronger, and where we don't put our energy gets weaker. It's like that. Our mind is made like that. So if we're doing unskillful things in our mind, it really matters, because those mental habits make the grooves deeper, whether they're witnessed or not. So these habits of mind affect everything. So if we want to be kinder and wiser, we need to look at it. So the Dharmapada says, experiences are preceded by mind, produced by mind, led by mind. So we've got to look at it. But don't get paralyzed and overwhelmed and think, oh my God, my mind is just full of unskillfulness. And don't worry about that. Yes, it is true. We have to work on it, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of love. And but it will affect us. There's a really, really good teaching in the Dharmapada that says, in fact, I'll read it to you because it's so beautiful. So this is the Dharmapada, which you might know about. Do not underestimate evil, thinking it will not approach me. A water jug becomes full by the constant falling of drops of water. Similarly, the spiritually immature person, little by little, fills himself with evil. Evil's a bad word, isn't it? But, unskillfulness. Do not underestimate the good, thinking it will not approach me. A water jug becomes full by the constant falling of drops of water. Similarly, the wise person, little by little, fills themselves with good. So that's kind of what we've got to remember, that all those little skillful things that we do is buffing up our jewel, which is always there. So even if we have got the silly stuff going on, we can always remember that we've got the lovely stuff going on as well that is definitely filling those water jugs. But are we really willing to do that thing that means that change? Are we really willing not to have the thing that we really, really want to make sure that the jugs get full, that the good jug gets full? So, time to sing. So I've got my little backing band down here. So this was, it's for your delight and delectation. It's a song, the modern popular song by Perry Como, Magic Moments. Remember that one? Well, this is Mraksha Moments. And the chorus, you can join in with if you want. Okay, I'm going to get the note right, because if it goes too high, we can't sing it. Oh, turned it off. Oh, hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can't do it that long. Sorry. Mraksha moments, are we really willing? Mraksha moments, which jog are we filling? Chorus again. Mraksha moments, are we really willing? Mraksha moments, which jug are we filling? Yes, free ride on the train, I did it again. Oh, they can afford it. I think it's okay, I don't need to say, don't think anyone saw it. Mraksha moments, join in. Are we really willing? Mraksha moments, which jug are we filling? Watch 10 in a row, just 2 more to go, can't wait for the ending. I don't meditate, my mind's in a state, just keep pretending. Mraksha moments, are we really willing? Mraksha moments, which jug are we filling? The last piece of cake, that was a mistake. Don't need to admit it. 3 glasses of wine, oh, it'll be fine. Tomorrow I'll quit it. Mraksha moments, are we really willing? Mraksha moments, which jug are we filling? I'll use a shampoo, well, what can you do? Or she'll never notice. But what would I do if my preceptor knew?
That's not what she taught us.
With practice we can learn to make these Mraksha moments full of love. So it's all that kind of silly stuff, It's all the silly stuff. But then apotropia. Did you notice the apotropia? What would I do if my preceptor knew? And she'd be sad. But she'd just say, all right, tell me all about it. Let's sort it out. What was that all about? And then mainly what she'd say is, what's that all about? And that's it, really. So, Mraksha, concealment. Keeps me still separate, isolated and lonely. So Sangha is the one place we can go. Well, I guess there are other places. Sangha is a place where we could open up. And opening up is a really tough practice, and honesty too is a really tough practice. But it's just a skill. We know that it's a skill, same as all the other precepts. It's a skill that we can get better at. So, maybe one day a week, take that on. Take it on as a practice. It's risky. If people knew the real me, this was my big thing, if people knew the real me, they wouldn't want to know me, they reject me. But actually, it's the mask that gets in the way. That's what gets in the way, not the imagined reaction to the real me. And, we can see masks a mile off, can't we? They're like a neon sign flashing over your head. We just know when somebody's doing that, but it's quite subtle. So something really beautiful opens up when we stop pretending and we allow vulnerability. So we have an idea of what we're supposed to be like. We have this idea of what a good Buddhist is or something like that. And we try and twist ourselves into that shape, but it always fails. Just trying to fit in always fails. So we just have to keep showing up and keep telling the truth about ourselves. And just bearing in mind what the Buddha said about telling the truth. That the right time, that it needs to be kind, it needs to be true, and it needs to be beneficial. So we don't go blurting out, to somebody who might not be in a position to hear it. We've got to be wise about these things, haven't we? So it needs to be the right time, it needs to be kind, beneficial, and true to tell, to tell the truth. If we're taking on that honesty precept, just bear that in mind. So in the threefold puja, it says, may our, what's the first, the Buddha one? What's the Buddha one? May our mind become Buddha. May our thought become Dharma. May our communication with one another be Sangha. So it's that thing about what does that mean? May our communication with one another be Sangha. And I've looked at a big question mark. Maybe that's a question you could ask in your groups. What does that actually mean? But I was thinking that maybe it's that one where it has to be honesty first or kindness first or one of them. But anyway, something to think about. I would argue Hari and Apatrapya, very important as guardians of the Sangha. But gently, kindly, we finished that song with Mraksha moments full of love. So that's what we have to do to work with this. We conceal things, perhaps because we're ashamed. Coming back to the title, perhaps the shame around it. So with loads and loads of love, just accepting ourselves and understanding that we can change. Gently, kindly working with Mraksha, laughing at ourselves quite a lot. I did a lot of that, how silly we get. And we can free ourselves to just rid ourselves of the wrong view of shame. That's my talk.